In a small town surrounded by wide golden fields and quiet ranches, there lived a man named Luke. He was known by everyone as a hard-working rancher. Luke had spent most of his life working on his land. He woke up early every morning, rode his horses, and spent long hours taking care of the animals. Though he was a man of few words, he was respected by everyone for his dedication and strength. People said he was a true cowboy and his ranch was his life. Luke wasn't one to rush into anything, especially love. For years he lived alone, content with his work and his routine. His friends often tried to set him up with women in town, but he never felt a real connection with any of them. He wasn't interested in appearances or what others expected him to do. For Luke, it was about finding someone who understood him, someone who didn't judge him or his simple life, but it seemed like love had always been just out of reach. One summer evening at a local church event, Luke's life was about to change in a way he never expected. Emma was not from a wealthy family, nor was she the kind of woman that society often praised for her beauty. She had always struggled with her appearance, especially since she was often criticized for being too big by others in the town. People whispered behind her back, calling her names and making her feel small. But Emma was more than the size of her body. She had a kind heart, a strong will, and a quiet confidence that made her stand out in her own way. Emma worked at a local bookstore and volunteered at the church when she could. She always loved helping people and was known for her warm smile. But despite her friendly nature, she felt like an outsider in a world that seemed to favor smaller, thinner women. She had been hurt by cruel words before, and it made her wary of others. She often stayed to herself, reading books and dreaming of a life where she was seen for who she truly was. It was at one of those quiet church events where their paths crossed. Luke, who rarely attended social gatherings, had been asked to help with a community event. He wasn't excited about it, but it was important to support the town, so he agreed to come. That night, he found himself standing near the refreshment table when Emma walked in. She had a smile that could light up a room, but Luke noticed something more. There was a sense of peace about her, a calmness that drew him in. He hadn't planned on speaking to anyone, but as Emma passed by, he found himself saying hello. She smiled back and they began to talk. At first, it was small talk. They talked about the event, the weather, and their favorite books. Luke was surprised by how comfortable he felt talking to her. It was easy, like they had known each other for years. Emma, who had always been shy, felt the same way. She wasn't used to talking to men who weren't judging her or making her feel awkward. There was something about Luke's gentle nature that made her feel at ease. As they continued talking, Emma felt a warmth inside her that she hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time, someone was paying attention to her without looking at her size. Luke didn't see a woman who was too big. He saw someone who was kind, smart, and funny. He found himself wanting to learn more about her, to know who she really was beneath the surface. As the evening went on, they spent more time talking and laughing. When it was time for the event to end, Luke hesitated for a moment. He hadn't expected to enjoy the evening so much. He didn't want it to end just yet. "Maybe we could talk again sometime," Luke said shyly, a little unsure of himself. Emma, surprised by his kindness, smiled brightly. "I'd like that." Over the next few weeks, they began to meet more often. Luke would visit the bookstore where Emma worked, and they would talk about books, life, and their dreams. They learned that they had a lot in common. They both loved the outdoors, enjoyed simple pleasures like a good cup of coffee, and shared a love for animals. Emma found that Luke was not just a quiet rancher, but a thoughtful and caring person. He listened to her when she spoke, and he made her laugh in ways no one else had. For Luke, every moment with Emma felt easy. He had never been good at talking to women, but with her it just felt natural. He admired her strength, the way she didn't let the cruelty of the world bring her down. It was obvious to him that Emma was more than what people saw on the outside. She had a heart that was full of love, kindness, and a fierce independence that he respected. One evening, as they sat on a bench under the stars after a long walk, Luke turned to Emma, his heart beating a little faster than usual. "Emma," he said, his voice soft but steady, "I've never met anyone like you before. You're the kind of person I've been looking for my whole life." Emma was taken aback. She had always felt that her size would hold her back from ever being truly loved. But with Luke, it was different. His words made her feel special, something she had never felt before. It was as if, for the first time in her life, someone saw her for who she truly was, Not just the size of her body, but the size of her heart. "Luke," she replied, her voice full of warmth. "I've never met anyone who made me feel the way you do. You make me feel like I'm enough just as I am." And in that moment, Emma knew that she had found something rare and beautiful. She wasn't sure where their relationship would go, but she felt something real between them. It wasn't about the way they looked or the opinions of others. It was about something deeper, a connection that felt like home. Luke and Emma didn't rush anything. They took their time, enjoying each other's company and building a friendship that would turn into something more. Luke was patient, understanding, and never once made Emma feel less than beautiful. As Luke and Emma's relationship blossomed, the quiet town where they lived started to take notice. At first, it was just a whisper here and there. People had seen them together at church events and at the local bookstore. But as the weeks passed, the rumors began to spread, and soon everyone was talking. Most of the people in the town were good-hearted, but there were some who couldn't seem to mind their own business. Emma had always known that her size made her different, and growing up, the whispers and the stares had become a part of her life. She had learned to ignore them, to walk with her head held high, but the truth was the judgment always stung. Now, as her relationship with Luke grew, so did the attention. Some people in town began to ask questions. Why would someone like Luke, a strong rancher with a reputation, want to be with someone like Emma? They would talk behind their backs, casting sideways glances when they thought they weren't being watched. The whispers became louder, more hurtful, and it was hard for Emma not to hear them. Luke, who had always been a man of few words, was frustrated by the gossip. He didn't care what others thought. To him, it didn't matter that Emma didn't fit the world's idea of a perfect woman. She was perfect in her own way. Her kindness, her smile, and her ability to see the world with such warmth made her more beautiful than anything he had ever seen. One afternoon, while Luke was working on the ranch, a group of men from the town stopped by to chat. They leaned against the fence, talking about the weather, the crops, and the usual town gossip. But as the conversation went on, it took a different turn. "You know, Luke," one of the men said, "we've been seeing you around with that girl, Emma. She's a nice enough lady, but, well, I don't know if she's the kind of woman a man like you should be with. I mean, you're a rancher. You need someone who can keep up with you. Someone strong and able to handle the hard work on the land." Luke stood up straight, his eyes narrowing. He had heard comments like this before, but hearing it again still hurt. He knew what the men were getting at. They were talking about Emma's weight. They didn't see what he saw in her. "She's more than capable," Luke said calmly, his voice firm, "and I don't need anyone's approval to be happy with her." The men fell silent, but Luke could see the doubt in their eyes. They didn't understand. They didn't know what it was like to see someone for who they truly were. They only saw the surface, and that was what bothered Luke the most. It was as if Emma wasn't allowed to be happy because of how she looked. But Luke didn't care. He knew Emma was strong. She had already shown him that by the way she worked alongside him on the ranch, tending to the animals and helping with tasks she'd never done before. She was always willing to learn, never afraid of getting her hands dirty. She was more than just someone to be judged. She was his partner. Meanwhile, Emma felt the sting of the town's gossip every day. At first, she tried to ignore it, thinking that maybe it would fade away as people saw how happy she and Luke were together. But it didn't. Every time she walked into the local grocery store or bumped into someone at church, she could feel their eyes on her. She could hear the whispers, the quiet comments that were meant to be behind her back but somehow always reached her ears. At first, Emma tried to brush it off. She told herself that she didn't need to care what other people thought. She had Luke, and he had shown her more love and respect than anyone else ever had. That should have been enough, right? But it wasn't always easy. The town's judgment made her question herself. Was she good enough for Luke? Did she deserve his love? These were questions that seemed to haunt her late at night when she lay awake in bed. She loved him, and he loved her, but the cruel words of others made her doubt herself. One day, after a long day of work, Luke and Emma sat on the porch of the ranch house, looking out at the setting sun. Emma had been quiet all evening, and Luke noticed the way she seemed to shrink into herself. "Hey," Luke said gently, his voice soft. "You've been quiet. Is everything okay?" Emma hesitated for a moment before answering. "It's just people, the town, I don't know how to ignore them anymore, Luke. They don't understand. They think I'm not good enough for you. Luke's heart ached at her words. He hated hearing her feel this way. He reached over and took her hand in his, squeezing it gently. Emma, he said softly, you are more than enough. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I love you for who you are, not for what anyone else thinks. They don't know what we have and they don't need to. Emma looked into his eyes and for a moment all her doubts faded away. She could see the truth in his words. Luke loved her. He loved her for everything she was, her heart, her strength, her kindness, not for the way she looked. That was all that mattered. The next morning, Emma woke up with a new sense of determination. She was tired of letting the judgment of others hold her back. She had a life with Luke to build, and she wasn't going to let the opinions of a few people in the town get in the way of that. She would prove to herself and to everyone else that she was strong enough to handle anything that came her way. Over the next few weeks, Emma continued to work alongside Luke on the ranch. She learned new skills, took on more responsibilities, and showed everyone that she was just as capable as anyone else. The gossip from the town continued, but Emma stopped listening to it. She focused on the love she had for Luke, the life they were building together, and the happiness that filled her heart every day. Slowly but surely, the people in the town began to notice something. They began to see how strong Emma was, not just physically, but emotionally and mentally. They saw how happy she made Luke, and how dedicated she was to the life they had built together. They saw her for who she really was, a woman of strength, kindness, and unwavering love. One by one, the whispers began to fade, replaced by quiet respect. The judgment didn't disappear completely, but it started to lose its power. Luke and Emma had proven that love wasn't about appearances. It was about the connection between two people, the way they supported each other and the life they created together. And for Emma, that was enough. The months passed and Luke and Emma's love for each other continued to grow stronger. The quiet town that once whispered behind their backs began to watch them more closely. Some people still couldn't understand why Luke had chosen Emma, but there was something undeniable about the bond they shared. Emma and Luke were inseparable. They had built a life together that felt right, one where they could be themselves without pretense or worry about the opinions of others. But the world outside their little bubble still had its doubts. One day, as they sat together under the old oak tree near the ranch house, Luke turned to Emma with a look of determination in his eyes. He had been thinking about it for weeks. Emma, he began softly, I can't imagine my life without you. You're the one I want to spend the rest of my days with. Will you marry me? Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had been waiting for this moment, yet when it came, she felt a mix of emotions. She was overwhelmed with joy, but she also felt a flicker of uncertainty. She loved Luke with all her heart, but would their marriage be accepted by the town? Would the judgment she had faced for so long continue even after they were married? But when she looked into Luke's eyes, she knew he was the one. He had never judged her, never made her feel less than. He loved her completely, just as she was. Yes, Emma replied, tears filling her eyes. Yes, I will marry you. The news spread quickly through the town. Some people congratulated them, happy to see the two of them so in love. But there were others who, behind their smiles, couldn't help but wonder why Luke had chosen Emma. They still believed that someone like him deserved more than what Emma could offer. But Luke didn't care about their opinions. He had made his choice and he was sure of it. As the wedding day grew closer, the couple began to prepare for the ceremony. They decided to get married on the ranch, in a small, intimate ceremony with only close family and friends. Emma spent days picking out a simple white dress, something that made her feel beautiful, without needing to impress anyone else. Luke, too, was busy preparing the ranch for the big day, making sure everything was perfect. Emma felt a sense of peace as the day approached. She was nervous, yes, but also excited. This was the moment she had dreamed of. The day when she would marry the man who saw her for who she truly was and loved her with all his heart. She was no longer worried about the judgment of others. She was going to marry Luke and nothing else mattered. But as the wedding day grew closer, the whispers of the town grew louder. There were some who still didn't understand. She's too big for him, they said. What does he see in her? Even as Emma and Luke prepared for their special day, the gossip continued. It hurt, of course, but Emma tried to keep her focus on the love she shared with Luke. The day of the wedding arrived, and the sun shone brightly in the sky. The ceremony was small but beautiful. Luke stood at the front of the small gathering, waiting for Emma to walk down the aisle. He looked handsome in his simple suit, his face beaming with pride and love. And then the moment came. Emma appeared at the entrance of the makeshift aisle, her heart racing. She was wearing a simple white dress that flowed gently with each step. Her hair was softly pinned back, and she had a nervous but joyful smile on her face. She felt like the most beautiful woman in the world, not because of the dress or the way she looked, but because she was about to marry the man who saw her for everything she was. As she walked toward Luke, the quiet buzz of conversation from the guests faded into the background. For the first time in a long time, Emma felt at peace. She wasn't concerned about what anyone else thought. She was walking toward the love of her life, and that was all that mattered. Luke's face lit up when he saw her. He couldn't take his eyes off her. In that moment, she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Emma wasn't just the woman he loved. She was everything to him. Her strength, her kindness, her heart. They made her more beautiful than any physical trait could. When Emma reached him, Luke took her hands in his voice filled with emotion. "You look incredible," he whispered. "I am so lucky to be standing here with you." Emma smiled through her tears. "I feel the same way," she said softly. The ceremony went smoothly. As they exchanged vows, Luke promised to love Emma for the rest of his life, to stand by her through all the good times and the bad, to cherish her every day. Emma, with tears in her eyes, promised to love Luke with all her heart, to be his partner, his friend, and his wife, no matter what the world thought of them. As the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Luke kissed Emma gently, sealing their commitment. The small crowd cheered, and for the first time Emma felt truly seen. She wasn't the woman the town had talked about behind her back. She wasn't the too fat girl they had mocked. She was Luke's wife, his beautiful wife. But as the ceremony ended and the reception began, the whispers returned. There were still some in the town who couldn't understand. As Emma and Luke danced their first dance together, the same people who had once whispered about their relationship continued to make comments. They couldn't stop talking about how unusual it was for Luke to marry someone like Emma. Yet as the music played and they swayed together, Emma realized something important. The whispers, the judgment, it no longer mattered. She had Luke and he had her. They were stronger than anything the town could throw at them. And as the evening drew to a close, with the stars shining brightly overhead, Emma leaned into Luke, resting her head on his shoulder. "I never thought I'd find someone who would love me like this," she whispered. Luke kissed the top of her head, his voice steady and full of love. "I've always known you were special, Emma, and now the whole world knows it too." In that moment, surrounded by love and the quiet sound of the night, Emma realized that the opinions of others didn't define her. It was Luke's love that mattered, and with that love they could face anything together. After their wedding, Luke and Emma's life together on the ranch was full of love and happiness, but it was also full of challenges. The town's whispers didn't disappear overnight, and there were still some who questioned whether Emma was truly good enough for Luke. The couple had grown used to the judgment, but it still hurt at times. Emma had always been the subject of whispers and sideways glances, but now it felt different. Now she wasn't just a single woman, she was Luke's wife, and that brought a whole new level of attention. Some of the women in town still found it hard to believe that someone like Luke, who was strong, handsome, and hard-working, would choose a woman like Emma. They would smile politely, but Emma could see the doubt in their eyes. The words they never said were as loud as the ones they did speak. At first, Emma wasn't sure how to handle it. She had always tried to rise above the judgment, but now, with Luke by her side, it was harder to ignore. The hurtful words stung deeper when she knew they weren't just about her anymore. They were about her and Luke. People had begun to question their marriage, their life and the love they shared, but Luke never wavered in his support for her. He loved her with all his heart, and he would never let anyone make Emma feel less than she was. He showed his love through actions, not just words. He spent his days working beside her, teaching her how to care for the animals and run the ranch. They worked side by side, and Emma proved time and time again that she was more than capable. She was strong, dedicated, and determined to build a future with Luke. There were many days when Emma felt like she had something to prove. She wanted to show the town that she was just as capable as anyone else, that she was strong enough to handle the hard work on the ranch. She wasn't going to let anyone's opinion of her stop her from living the life she had always dreamed of. A life with Luke, full of love and purpose. One morning, as the sun began to rise, Luke and Emma were working together to fix a broken fence on the ranch. They had spent hours in the hot sun, repairing the posts and making sure the animals would be safe. Emma was covered in dirt, her hair tangled from the wind, but she didn't mind. This was her life now, and she loved it. Luke handed her a hammer and she worked alongside him, feeling strong and capable. As they worked, a car pulled up to the ranch. Emma didn't recognize the vehicle, but when the driver stepped out, she felt a pang of nervousness. It was one of the women from town, a woman who had always made comments about Emma's size. Emma's heart sank. She had hoped that the judgment would fade with time, but it seemed like it was still there. The woman approached Emma and Luke with a forced smile. "Well, well," she said, eyeing Emma with a glance that made Emma feel small. "I see you're really settling into this life on the ranch, Emma. Are you sure you're up for all this hard work? You don't want to get too tired, do you?" Luke's eyes narrowed, and he stepped in front of Emma protectively. "Don't worry about her," he said firmly. "Emma's stronger than you think." Emma, though, took a deep breath and stepped forward, looking the woman in the eye. "I'm more than capable," she said, her voice steady. "I've been working hard, learning every day, and I'm not going anywhere. I'm here to stay." The woman didn't say anything in response, but her eyes showed a flicker of surprise. Emma had stood her ground, and the woman could see it. She was used to seeing Emma shy away, to seeing her second-guess herself, but not anymore. Emma was no longer the person she used to be. She was stronger, braver, and she wasn't afraid to stand up for herself. As the woman left, Luke placed a hand on Emma's shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze. "You were amazing," he said, a proud smile on his face. Emma looked at him, her heart full of gratitude. "Thanks, Luke. I'm not going to let anyone make me feel less than again. I'm strong and I'm proud of who I am, and I'm proud of us." From that moment on, things began to change. Emma's confidence grew, and she found herself standing taller every day. The people in town who had once doubted her began to see her in a new light. They saw how hard she worked, how dedicated she was, and how much she loved Luke. Slowly, the whispers turned into respect. But Emma didn't need the approval of the town anymore. She had Luke, and that was all that mattered. Their love was stronger than any judgment or criticism. It wasn't always easy, but they were a team, and together they could face anything. One evening, after a long day of work, Luke and Emma sat on the porch of their home watching the sunset. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and a gentle breeze swept across the fields. Emma rested her head on Luke's shoulder, feeling the weight of the day melt away. "I never thought I'd be here," Emma said softly, her voice filled with wonder. "I never thought I'd be able to live this life, to build something so beautiful. And I never thought I'd feel this happy." Luke kissed the top of her head, his voice low and steady. "You deserve all of this, Emma. You've worked so hard and you've proven yourself to everyone, and especially yourself." "You're incredible," Emma smiled, feeling the warmth of his words fill her heart. She knew that their journey wasn't over. There would still be challenges ahead, but together, they could face anything. The love they shared was stronger than anything the world could throw their way. And as the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Emma realized that she didn't need to prove anything to anyone. She had already proven everything she needed to herself, to Luke, and to the world. She was enough. She was strong, capable, and loved, and that was all that mattered. Years passed, and the small town that had once whispered behind Emma's back began to change. The once doubtful townspeople now saw the love and strength that Emma and Luke shared. Their story was no longer one of mockery or judgment. It had become a story of triumph, of a love so strong that it could not be broken by the words or opinions of others. Emma and Luke had proven something to the world, that true love was not about appearance, wealth, or the expectations of others. It was about the heart, the soul, and the way two people cared for one another. Emma had grown in ways she never thought possible. She had always struggled with self-doubt and insecurity, but over the years she had learned to embrace who she was. The cruel words that once pierced her heart no longer had the power they once did. She had built a life with Luke, a life filled with purpose, hard work, and love. She had become more than just the woman people had once judged. She had become a symbol of strength, resilience, and self-acceptance. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their ranch house, watching the sun set over the fields, Emma turned to Luke with a smile on her face. The soft breeze blew through her hair and she felt a peace she had never known before. "Do you remember when we first met?" Emma asked, her voice soft and full of warmth. Luke looked at her, his eyes filled with love. "Of course I do," he replied. "It feels like a lifetime ago, doesn't it? But I knew from the moment I met you that you were something special." Emma smiled. "I never thought I would find someone who saw me for who I truly was. I spent so many years believing I wasn't enough. But you showed me that I am, that I always have been." Luke gently took her hand, holding it in his. "You're more than enough, Emma. You always have been. The world can be harsh, but you've proven that love and kindness are stronger than anything, and I'm proud of everything you've become." Emma looked out at the ranch, the land they had worked so hard to build together. It was beautiful, filled with the animals they cared for, the crops they had planted, and the memories they had created. She had once wondered if she would ever fit into a world that seemed to care so much about appearances, but now as she looked at the life she had built with Luke, she knew that it didn't matter. The judgment of the past no longer held power over her. Over the years, Luke and Emma had faced their share of challenges. There were days when the work seemed never-ending, when the weight of their responsibilities felt heavy. But no matter what, they had each other. They had learned to lean on one another, to find strength in their partnership. And together they had created a home filled with love, laughter, and respect. The town had come to respect them too. The people who had once doubted Emma now looked up to her. They saw the way she worked alongside Luke, the way she cared for the animals and tended to the land with such dedication. They saw how much Luke loved her, and how deeply she loved him in return. It wasn't long before the whispers faded completely, replaced by admiration. Emma was no longer the too fat woman they had once mocked. She was Luke's wife, his equal, and the woman who had helped him build a life they both could be proud of. As time passed, the couple's love only grew stronger. They celebrated the good times, the harvests, the quiet evenings on the porch, the shared laughter that filled their home. They also faced the hard times together, the storms that threatened their crops, the difficult years when the ranch didn't produce as much as they had hoped. But through it all, they never gave up. They had built a foundation of love and trust, and nothing could shake it. One afternoon, as they worked together in the barn, Emma turned to Luke with a thoughtful expression on her face. "You know," she said, "I've been thinking a lot about how far we've come. When we first got married, I never could have imagined this life. I didn't know if I'd ever be good enough for you. But look at us now. We've made something beautiful together." Luke smiled, wiping the sweat from his brow. "You've always been good enough, Emma. From the moment I met you, I knew you were everything I needed. You've been my partner, my best friend, and the love of my life. We've built this life together, and I wouldn't want it any other way." Emma felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She had spent so many years feeling like she wasn't enough, but now she realized that she was more than enough. She had Luke's love, and together, they had created a life that was full of purpose and meaning. The doubts and fears she once carried were long gone. She was confident in who she was and in the life they had built. The years had not only strengthened their bond, but had also left a lasting impact on the people around them. They had become role models for others, showing that love, kindness, and hard work could overcome anything. People in the town began to see Emma as more than just a woman who had once been judged for her appearance. She was a woman who had proven herself time and time again, who had built a life with Luke based on love, respect, and mutual support. One day, a young woman from the town came to visit Emma at the ranch. She was someone Emma had known for years, and the young woman had always been quiet, unsure of herself. She had heard about Emma and Luke's story, and she had come to ask for advice. "Emma," she said nervously, "I've always struggled with my confidence. I see the way people talk about me, and it hurts. I don't know if I can ever be as strong as you." Emma looked at her with kindness in her eyes. She remembered what it felt like to doubt herself, to wonder if she was good enough. She knew what it was like to feel like the world didn't see her for who she truly was, but now she had the wisdom to see things differently. "You are enough," Emma said softly, her voice filled with warmth. "You don't need anyone's approval to know your worth. You are strong, capable, and beautiful just as you are. And when you find someone who sees that, just like Luke saw it in me, you'll know you're on the right path. But most importantly, you have to believe in yourself. The young woman smiled, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Thank you, Emma. I'll try to remember that. As the young woman left, Emma felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had come a long way from the girl who once felt small and unworthy. Now she was a woman who had not only found love and strength within herself, but had become a beacon of hope for others. Emma and Luke's love story was more than just a story of a man and a woman. It was a legacy of resilience, of two people who defied the odds and built something beautiful together. They had proven to the world that love, when it's true and pure, can overcome anything, even the judgment of others. And that was their greatest legacy.